So, Josh, they recently added 2,000 new words to the Scrabble dictionary, mostly words used by Gen Z. Can you imagine the entertainment value of watching a boomer play Scrabble with a Gen Z now? The boomer would absolutely lose their minds.
Get crushed, yeah.
But we will keep our minds as we start the back nine.
This is the Back Nine with Dennis Williams and Josh Mora.
All right, Mr. Vocabulary Guy, it is crazy. Can you imagine if they pull out the word ack or forms of bougie, like the bougiest? Yeah. Those are words now that are good. So it's like, it's crazy.
Well, but we have kids who are not far off of... My kids are both Gen Z. Your younger one doesn't really count as Gen Z?
Oh, yeah, she's Gen Z for sure. And my older one is the last year for millennials, so she's like on the cusp.
Yeah.
She's cuspy, but she's definitely more millennial.
But don't you know their vernacular a little bit? I mean, you could use them.
But we're not boomers. I'm talking about, you remember trying to play with your grandparents? Who whatever?
Oh, for sure.
For the greatest generation, like the generation before boomers, it was a nightmare that you try to bring a word that was down your... in your vernacular, and they would be like, that's not a word, and you'd have to be like, yes, it is. And now it would be crazy. I'm not. I think we'd be okay with it. Like, but I'm talking about like my parents playing.
Playing
like the grandparents playing against their grandkids. That's what I'm talking about. The boomers playing against.
So there's a game. There's an actual board game that's called Mind the Gap. And you're supposed to play it across the generation. So there's supposed to be a boomer, a Gen X, a millennial, and a Gen Zer. You can either play generations against generations, or you can play with one on each team. And you go through these cycles where you have to answer. A boomer would have to answer the millennial questions. It was really I think the Gen Xers have an advantage there because the boomer questions we know the 60s, right? We know the 50s. And we know because we have kids that are Gen Zers, we can answer their questions. But the same is not true the other way, right? I mean, the Gen Zers, you ask them history questions about the 50s or 60s, they have no idea. None. Right. And similarly, what you're talking about with the vernacular and the current events.
I just think it could be like a made-for-TV event. You could have like this.
I love this.
It would be hilarious to see like my kids playing Scrabble against their grandparents.
I would love that. I would. That would be a great television show. If we could put some life to it, it's not like cameras around a board game.
Yeah, well, they do. I mean, they show a lot of boring things on TV.
They do.
The National Spelling Bee's on, so I think we could do a Scrabble.
Yeah, but
game.
my good friend hosts that every year. So
okay,
Kevin and Gandhi.
We've both been traveling a lot lately. I have. Wow.
Yeah, both. Yeah. Well, it's been a while since we've been in the studio together.
And I have to thank you for something. So Josh, a couple years ago when I started my own company, said, and I used to just like log on. I was my own travel agent, right? You're starting your own company, you're traveling, you're looking for the cheapest flights. And, Southwest, JetBlue, whatever I could find. He goes, no, dude, just stick with Delta. He goes, be a Delta flyer and the perks they give you and they make everything right. So I took his advice and I started doing it. Great call. Like I hear the nightmares of all the other airlines. And believe me, I've been stuck in an airport, but Delta takes care of you. Delta's not perfect, but I will tell you, between the lounges they have and being able to be like platinum status with Beck always jokes like I love talking about the fact that I'm platinum now. Like
love that. I have the tags on my bags.
She's like, would you please stop already with the platinum?
No, because you know what? It's totally bougie. That's why, and I'm into that.
I'm the bougiest.
Yeah. No, but yes, and they do. They take care of you. My story, I won't tell all the details, but my bag, one time on a flight to L.A., ended up getting soaked on one side with gasoline and citric. It had clearly something had spilled and my bag had been put on it. And the bottom line is they replaced this older, nice bag, but an older bag with a brand new one, no questions asked. And they've had my loyalty ever since.
I could never get there, but I have an idea for the absolute elite, the top of the elite status that Delta could go for. I think they should have one person on every plane called the first mate. Like, you just get to sit in the very first row. And if the captain wants you to come up and sit with him for a little while, you can.
Keep him company. Yeah.
Keep him company if he's bored or he has to go to the bathroom. You get to sit in his seat for a minute. Like, one guy who's like the elite of the elite status at Delta should be like called the first mate or something. And every flight has just one of them. So you really get to
get you a direct
really
line
like
to Ed Bastian. I think he's the CEO of Delta. Let's pitch it.
Don't you like it?
It's okay.
Like it. It's a little.
You've had a lot of good ideas.
I think it's a little.
One really good idea that you had last season was bringing in the topic of integrative medicine, and I hope I have come up with an equally good idea to talk about nutrition. Do you think so?
I do, because it's all tied into that too, and my diet's changed considerably since I got involved with integrated medicine. So it's a good conversation.
4.5 seasons in, we have not talked about that before. And a good friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine, speaks to that very well. And she was a Barbie before the movie came out. For however long I've known her, she has been the Barbie in my life that I've known. And so we are bringing in Barbie Boules, who has a social media handle and a brand called the Cognition Dietitian. And Barbie, you look fabulous. And it's so wonderful to have you here. So maybe you can talk a little bit about how you got into this. How did this become your career path?
Yeah, so it's actually a second career for me. I went initially to school for communications and marketing. I did that for a little while and I was bored to tears. And I've always loved food. I've been cooking since I was 12. There's medicine in my family, and just the science of it and the love for food kind of came together kind of around the age of 27. And I literally woke up one morning and I said, I'm going back to school and I want to be a dietitian. So I did that, and I have been in private practice ever since. I initially thought that I would work in clinical dietetics, but I literally got pregnant the day I finished my internship. So there was no point in going to work for someone for 7 or 8 months. So I just started my own practice immediately, which was, I think, a really a godsend for me and just my trajectory of my career. And yeah, always really interested in women's nutrition in particular. I've treated a lot of men. I've worked with a lot of men, but women in particular, because during school, I really noticed that there wasn't much distinction between men and women and their needs, with the exception of pregnancy and lactation. And I know from my interns that it's still similar today. So I think we need more people out there, investigating, researching, and working with women on their unique needs, but love my men too.
So I've taken up some integrative medicine stuff and been on what's called the Mediterranean diet. So how do you assess what someone needs from a diet standpoint? Is it based on age, health, like health history? To kind of take us through the short version of how you prescribe diet for people.
Yeah. So first of all, I think that anyone pretty much can benefit from a Mediterranean approach to eating. What I love about Mediterranean is that you can really adjust it for your particular preferences, whether it's vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, omnivore. But when it comes to laying out a plan for someone or advising someone, especially in midlife, this is when this becomes really important, to get a handle on your metabolic health markers. So your LDL cholesterol, particular blood pressure, A1C, and fasting glucose, maybe fasting insulin, and then your body composition, especially if you're someone who's carrying excess intra-abdominal fat. So I would assess all of those markers. Hopefully we've got some lab work, and then we've also got physical presentation. And then I would tweak a Mediterranean approach to perhaps be super low in saturated fat, or we'd be really mindful about, refined carbohydrates if we've got some glucose issues and so on. But I love a Mediterranean approach as just sort of well-rounded, that you can fine tune given the individual's needs. But I'm really looking at metabolic health markers and with an eye towards dementia, particularly Alzheimer's prevention.
So I definitely want to get into that part of it a little bit later as midlife issues become older age issues. But when you talk about the markers, how do you locate those? How do you help your clients find them? How can clients or people who are looking at it on their own and getting started in trying to figure out where are they now in their 40s or in their 50s? How can they find those things and get a baseline for what's coming next?
Yeah, so ideally we're being a really good patient and we're seeing our primary care provider at least once a year, and we're getting these labs run or these assessments. Again, I'll say it again because it's really important. What we're really talking about is metabolic health, and metabolic health has 4 sort of domains: blood pressure, blood sugar, blood lipids, and body composition. So your blood pressure, obviously with a cuff, you do that at your doctor's office, although once a year is not enough, especially as we get into older age. I personally believe everyone should have a home cuff. You $50 on Amazon, take it to your doctor's office to have it calibrated, and take your blood pressure every once in a while to be sure, under different conditions, to be sure that we're Ideally, we're around 115 over 75, although anything under 120 over 80 is considered acceptable. And then hopefully you're having your lipids run every year. So LDL cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, triglycerides, although ApoB or apolipoprotein B is a marker that will probably replace LDL cholesterol in terms of its importance. This is something that you would want to ask for. It's not going to be part of your normal lipid panel, but you're getting that, and hopefully you're tacking on ApoB. Something else I just want to mention, because it does impact about 30% of the population worldwide, and that's something called LP little a or lipoprotein A. It's a genetically influenced type of LDL cholesterol that is highly atherogenic. It's about 6 times as atherogenic as LDL alone, and about 30% of people will be impacted by this. Their LP little a will be high. There is no specific treatment for LP little a yet. There will be in the next couple of years, lots of trials going on, but what that means for you, if you are someone with elevated LP little a, is you need to keep your LDL cholesterol super low. And we definitely want it under 100 milligrams per deciliter. Don't listen to these people who say LDL cholesterol doesn't matter and you want a carnivore diet and so on. You want your LDL under 100 milligrams per deciliter, ideally really around 70. Mm-hmm. And if you've had an event or you're high risk, 55 milligrams per deciliter. Then HbA1c, so this is your glucose over the last 3 months. You want that under 5.7, fasting glucose under 100. And your body composition. This is a little tougher to assess, but I really do recommend, especially by the time you get to midlife, so you go and have a DEXA scan, a body composition DEXA scan, or a bioelectrical impedance. The technology isn't quite as good as a DEXA, but it'll give you complete body composition, muscle mass, fat mass, hopefully visceral fat, which is the really important type of fat we want to pay attention to. Insulin resistance as a result of excess visceral fat. So that's what people should be looking for, and making sure they're getting into their doctor's office at least annually to have all of that assessed. Really important to get on top of, because those midlife numbers matter. That is what is set in the stage for our 60s, 70s, 80s, and hopefully beyond.
So Barbie, my experience is, and I wonder how you get around this. So I had to go to a different kind of doctor to get those blood tests, and I had a lot of that stuff done, and they did the full blood panel, and I could go back and check the markers based on what you just said, probably, because I think they did all of that. Now, the issue that I had prior to that was primary care physicians just want you in and out, and they test you for the things that are important that they think are important for your age, for PSA, and which is important. All these things are really important, but those traditional markers, do you ask your primary care physician if he'll give you all these tests, and will they, or do you need to find sort of a more forward-thinking, integrative wellness doctor than your traditional practitioner?
It's a really good question, and this is a case-by-case basis. Some doctors are very forward-thinking, just Western-trained physicians are forward-thinking and already want to order all of this for you. The problem in our country is insurance, and they really are hemmed in by this 15-minute appointments, keeping costs low, not ordering tests outside of what is really indicated. Prevention is just not the name of the game in this country. I say, especially in midlife, it's important that you have a doctor who will order these tests for you. And if you don't, find a new one and treat the process of finding a doctor like an interview, and you're the one doing the hiring. It should be a partnership. It should not be them dictating to you what they think is appropriate. That said, they are the medical professionals and they are the experts. So we do want to defer to them on analysis of the results and everything in context and all of that. But you should be allowed to have these tests. And usually they're not very expensive out of pocket. If you need to go and have these done sort of separately, at least if your doctor will order them. And there are a lot of direct-to-consumer tests these days where you can have these things done. I don't love that avenue because I would want to make sure the results are super accurate. So I would want it to go through your doctor. But yes, you can absolutely ask. This is not crazy exotic stuff. It's not. It's stuff that hopefully will be routine in the next, say, 5-10 years. But right now it's not, and it's important.
We'll be right back.
Friends, over the last few seasons, we've introduced you to our friend Pete, or more to the point, our friends at Pete. Peat is the present and future of corporate training. It's a proprietary platform that allows mid-sized companies to build relevant, contemporary training programs quickly, efficiently, and inexpensively. With Peat's AI-powered platform, you'll get customized, interactive, threaded curriculum built in a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost. Whether it's compliance, leadership, sales strategies, technical skills, employee onboarding, or anything your company needs for its ongoing training and culture demands, Peat designs and delivers exactly what you are looking for: fast, efficient, and effective. With Peat, you can focus on what matters most: developing your employees and growing your business. Peat, corporate training reimagined. Visit Peat.com, that's PETE.com, to learn more and get started today.
All right, back to the show. Yeah, and the doctors need to get trained up to learn all of the new tests too, right? So, Barbie, you had talked a little bit too about how the problems that start to emerge in middle age lead to serious problems in older age. What are those kinds of things that men and women of this age in middle age need to watch out for? What are the harbingers of future problems, and what are those specific problems?
Yeah. So again, it's your metabolic health. It's your blood pressure, it's your lipids, it's your blood sugar, and it's that intra-abdominal fat that can start accumulating just because of body composition changes. That is primarily, at least as far as we know at this point about the human body, that is primarily due to a loss of muscle mass. So keeping muscle mass nice and where we want it to be at this age and beyond is so, so, so important. You know, I say all the time to women my age, muscle mass was just something we were not taught about. It was never discussed that we should be strong. It was that we should be skinny. And as a result, we've lost decades of muscle building and protecting our bones and protecting our metabolic health. And now we're in our 50s and we don't have the muscle mass to prevent all that visceral fat accumulation and to protect our metabolic health. So we can get it back, but it takes a lot more effort. So I would say, again, you're really staying on top of those markers of your metabolic health, because type 2 diabetes or insulin resistance plays a role in all of the diseases that we see at this age, the non-communicable diseases. So making sure you're really staying on top of that intra-abdominal fat and your glucose. Heart disease, it's our number one killer for men and women. If we're keeping our LDL where it should be, we could prevent probably, by some statistics, 80 to 90% of heart disease. And that LDL or ApoB. So again, please don't listen to all the carnivore people who are telling us to eat sticks of butter and a whole bunch of red meat and LDL doesn't matter. It matters. And your blood pressure. Keeping your vascular health in good shape. So making sure you're doing cardiovascular exercise, you're not eating too much saturated fat, you're eating lots of fiber. This is all really important for your vascular health.
Where do you fall in sugar? Is it like not a lot, cut it out completely? Where do you fall in that?
So the guidelines, I follow the American Heart Association's guidelines, again, because I am so interested in your metabolic health and your vascular health. And their recommendations are less than 6% of your total calories coming from added sugar. So for most people, that's going to range between 4 and 6 teaspoons a day. And remember, this is added. So this is what you add to your coffee, you put in your yogurt, you put in your oatmeal, whatever, or you have a donut. This does not include fruit. We don't want to consider fruit when we're talking about sugar because, yes, fruit contains sugar or fructose and sucrose, but it comes along with fiber and vitamins and minerals and phytonutrients and hydration. You cannot compare a banana to a cookie from a nutritional standpoint.
Right.
So we're not worried about that. But that said, juice, when we're stripping it of fiber and maybe it's lost some of its vitamin and mineral phytonutrient content, that's not what we're talking about. But fruit, whole fruit, don't worry about it. Eat it. There is absolutely no data that suggests that eating even a lot of fruit is associated with any diseases, whereas an excess of added sugar is. So I would say less than 6% of your total calories.
What are the things that are at this age absolutely must avoids in terms of the food that we're ingesting and drinks that we're ingesting?
So I must avoid, the only thing is trans fats. And that is just because it's so directly linked to cardiovascular disease. There's no there's nothing redeeming about it. So this is going to come in, it's mostly being taken out of the processed food supply, but it's also going to be in like fried foods and things like that. Want to be careful about the byproducts that are produced with charred meat, like charred animal proteins. That can be problematic, aging and carcinogenic. So being careful about grilling and things like that. You can minimize that though by marinating it in acid, like a vinegar or citrus. But what we want to be super mindful of is saturated fat. So keeping that to less than 7% of your total calories. Again, this is going to be unique. There are no blanket statements for everybody. There are some things that there are lots of approaches to good metabolic health, good brain health, good cardiovascular health, a healthy body composition. What they have in common is low saturated fat, so less than 7% of total calories, low added sugar, less than 6% of total calories, high fiber, so more than 30 grams a day, and little to no alcohol.
Yeah,
That's
it.
What's that?
Lots of plant foods so that we're getting a nice spectrum of vitamins, minerals, and phytonutrients.
Where do you fall on some of the processed plant foods? Because I've heard mixed things on like Beyond Burgers because of the chemicals that are in them and Impossible Burgers and things like that. I've heard both sides of that story, right? Like, are they good or they're probably better than a regular burger, but should you be eating something else? Like, where do you fall on some of that processed food that falls in the vegan and vegetarian space?
So the important thing about nutrition is that it is all, when you hear people speaking very dogmatically, this, that, black, white, bad, good, they're not nutrition experts.
Right.
It's always compared to what? So if we're taking a Beyond Burger and we're comparing it to a beef burger with a ton of saturated fat with bacon and cheese on it, yes, the Beyond Burger is going to be the choice that's better for your heart health, your metabolic health. If you're comparing it to, say, I don't know,
like a salmon burger or something like,
I mean, we also have to be mindful that people are probably eating them because they're vegan or vegetarian, so they may not be eating the salmon. I mean, I would go for the salmon over the Beyond Burger if you eat fish.
Right.
If you don't, tofu or edamame might be a better choice. But again, it's really important to remember compared to what. And because there's a lot of nuance there. And so for you, is this the better choice? Maybe, maybe not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. That's actually kind of how I approach it. Like, I have a very close cousin that's vegan. And she says, like, she used to get on her soapbox and proclaim that everybody needed to be vegan. And then she got to the point, I don't know, she had this revelation where, like, if you take one night off from eating meat, you're doing the vegan people, like, you're doing right by them, right? Like, if you have tofu one night instead of having meat, or you have a Beyond Burger one night, right? Like, every time you do it, that's significant, right? Like, so I kind of take it that way. Like, I'm just balanced now. I haven't cut anything completely out, but I'm way less in the red meat, saturated fats, all those kinds of things that I used to do as part of the Mediterranean diet. I try to stay away from red meats completely. I don't do it all the time, but mostly. So it's all moderation.
And how long have you been doing that?
I would say about 6 months. 6 months. I just started 6 months ago. Yeah, it's all about all kinds of different health things that I've been dealing with. But yeah, it's been a game changer. It helps me work out better. The biggest thing for me has been sleep. I probably sleep better than I ever have, and that's a combination of that. And I'm sure you talk in your practice about balancing nutrition with your workouts, meditation, all of those kinds of things as well, because a diet alone is not going to solve cardiovascular either, because stress is the number one killer in men. So it doesn't matter how good their diet is if they're over stressed out, right? Like, so there does have to be some balance. I'm sure you talk about that too, right?
I do. It's what I call the 4 pillars of optimal health: nutrition, sleep, exercise, and managing your stress. And I look at it like a table with 4 legs. If any one of them is weak, the table's going to fall over. We're not living optimally. So it doesn't really matter if your diet is, quote, perfect, although no such thing, and you're exercising really well. If you're not sleeping or you're stressed all the time, you're aging, your metabolic health is ultimately not going to be in good shape. And it's going to be a lot more difficult to maintain really nutrient dense eating and your exercise routine. if you're stressed out and exhausted. So yes, they are, in my opinion, equally important. People always think I'll say nutrition is the most important thing, and it's not. And it really, again, it's one of those things that really depends on you. If everything is a hot mess, what is the piece of this puzzle that is going to have the biggest impact on the rest the most quickly, so that you do have the energy to shop and cook and exercise or seek out help for stress or whatever you have to do? What is going to benefit you the most initially? Trying to take it all on at once rarely works long term.
Right.
Well, Barbie, you are a prolific social media poster talking about all of these things. So how do people find you, follow you? I have found you've posted several recipes that I now make regularly, and they're all delicious.
Oh, great.
The first one was that roasted the balsamic peppers one. Oh, that's fantastic. I love that.
I remember that you liked that.
I do.
Yeah.
I made it last week, in fact. I did, truly. So how can people find you, whether it's to work with you or just to follow you and to understand more about what you're talking about and to see the examples?
Sure. So I'm on only Instagram. That's my only social media. And it's the Cognition Dietitian, dietitian with a T, not a C.
Right.
And on my website, barbieboules.com. And I have something new coming in the new year that hopefully will be very accessible to all women. I've closed my one-on-one practice, and I'm kind of going more for a community platform to start in January. So thank you.
Great.
That's awesome.
Well, we've loved having you on. This is new information for our audience, and I know they will appreciate it as much as we do. And it's wonderful to see you. You look great again, and I look forward to staying in touch with you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. I'm your newest fan and follower. Thanks, Barbie. Thank you.
So that's Barbie. And I'm serious. This roasted pepper, like you just go to your grocery store, Publix down here in Florida, and you buy the bag of the peppers, and you just chop off the tops, and it's as simple as drizzling them with balsamic and salt and pepper and putting them in the oven at 350 for like 35 minutes.
Maybe you'll make it for me sometime.
I would love to do that. We'll make that happen. I'm staying at your place tonight. Are we cooking or are we going out?
We'll figure that out. Right. Maybe we're cooking now.
Yeah, we're cooking, sure. But let's bring her back to her. Yeah. And by the way, in her social profile, it's Boules is spelled Boules, and then the Cognition Dietitian has some underscores in it. So search for her by her name for our audience. But the things that she talked about, I mean, I think of all the things that we've talked about through the first 4+ seasons here, this is maybe the most important. I was watching a video of a doctor talking about what is the most important thing for middle-aged health. And he said, no matter how much you're working out, no matter how much you are exercising and paying attention, you can out-eat anything. So diet is the 80% of it, 85% of it. And she led us down that path.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And we've talked about this, we are in a culture that just feeds us terribly. Like, you have to be paying attention to what you are buying in the store, how you are cooking it, all of those kinds of things. I mean, there's so many things that we can do from a health standpoint with what we consume. And it's really not easy, because it's way easier to eat fast food and to be moving. We're all moving so fast that how do you just grab something really quickly? And I think the most important thing is, to me, has been that I don't have to be perfect at it, right?
Right.
I can just be better than I was each week, each time. And the fact that I think about it, right? I think about how much sugar I'm consuming, how much red meat I'm consuming, what kind of red meat I'm consuming. It's funny because the doctor we had on last season, Dr. Barber, said, he goes, you can have a steak once in a while, but I'd like to see you have the 6-ounce filet and not the 22-ounce ribeye, right?
Right.
I'm like, damn it, I love ribeye though. But I can just suck it up and have the 6-ounce filet. It's as simple as that when you're going to cheat that way, right?
He also talked about that our healthcare system is set up for sick care, not health care.
Right.
And Barbie reiterated 100%. That point. And so your doctors, you have to be assertive with your doctors about that testing and getting that baseline and understanding where you are. And then coming back to what you were saying about food, if you have a steak, whether it's the 6-ounce filet or the 22-ounce ribeye, don't get a burger the next day. Be conscious of what you've eaten over the course of several days. Then if someone's having a birthday, have a piece of cake, have a glass of wine, but don't have 7 pieces of cake or glasses of wine.
Right.
Just pay attention to what you're doing over the space of a week or 10 days. And if you have that in mind, you're going to be healthy.
Absolutely. The other thing is, she was very kind about this, about our Western medicine primary care physicians. I think it's harder than for most people to find the one that's going to do all the things she asked. They just don't think like that. I mean, I think you really have to seek that out. And I hope that this next generation does have a generation of doctors that do more of these blood panels and metabolic testing and all of these panels that the integrative wellness doctors do. I do think that is a very difficult challenge. That's probably the biggest hurdle that every one of our listeners has, is to find that type of primary care physician. I think that's always going to be something that's difficult.
Yeah, and one who's willing to spend some time with you, right? That's all part of it. And we can do better with healthcare as a country, but we can also control the things that we can control. And hopefully Barbie provided some guidance for all of our audience on that today.
She was fantastic. I think this is a very important episode. I love that we continue to give practical ways for people to improve their life on the back nine and have some fun with it.
Yeah, so we're going to go home after this. We're going to make something nice and healthy, a big, giant salad maybe. I think that sounds lovely. Maybe not?
That's boring. I think I'm gonna go with something a little more. We'll come up with something. She's got to have recipes other than salads that we can work.
And there are lots of resources for those kinds of recipes too. So Barbie Boules, a great guest, and we enjoyed having her as we enjoy having you all the time on The Back Nine.
Hi, I'm Kevin Zurich with Three Bridges Consulting. If your company is considering podcast advertising, consider Three Bridges your go-to partner. We specialize in connecting your brand with the perfect podcast and podcast hosts to reach a highly targeted audience. Podcasts really provide a unique opportunity to speak directly to your core consumer in a very engaging and intimate format. If you know who your audience is, we will find them and ensure your story resonates. So give us a call today to discover how podcast advertising can enhance your overall media strategy. Our number, 760-590-7634. Again, 760-590-7634. We look forward to hearing from you.
The Back Nine is lovingly organized by Janine Stella and recorded at Pixelworks Studios in Delray Beach, Florida.